You wake up at 3 in the morning again. Your heart is racing, your mind spinning through tomorrow's problems, next week's deadlines, next month's uncertainties. The weight on your chest feels like a boulder, and you can't catch your breath. Sound familiar? You're lying there in the darkness, and anxiety has become your unwelcome companion, whispering lies about everything that could go wrong. Maybe you've tried everything. Deep breathing exercises, meditation apps, positive thinking, journaling, therapy sessions. And while some of these things might help for a moment, that gnawing worry always seems to find its way back. It creeps in during your morning coffee, shadows your afternoon meetings, and steals your evening peace. You've become exhausted from fighting a battle that never seems to end. But what if I told you there's a different way? What if I told you that the very thing you've been searching for has been waiting for you all along? What if the answer isn't found in another technique or strategy, but in a person who said these exact words? Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. In this video, I'm going to show you how to find genuine freedom from anxiety through resting in Jesus. Not just temporary relief, but the kind of deep, soul-level peace that transforms how you face every day. We're going to explore what it actually means to rest with Jesus, why anxiety loses its grip when we understand who we are in Him, and how you can practically experience this rest starting today. But before we dive in, let me share something that might surprise you. I used to wake up every single morning with my stomach in knots. The moment consciousness hit, anxiety would flood my system like a dam bursting. I would spend hours each day consumed by worry about things that hadn't happened yet, problems that might never come, scenarios my mind invented to torture me with. I tried everything I could find to fix it, but nothing lasted. Then someone told me about resting in Jesus, and I thought it sounded too simple, too good to be true. Surely the answer to anxiety required more effort, more steps, more complexity. But that's exactly the beauty of what Jesus offers. It's not about doing more. It's about resting more. It's not about fighting harder. It's about surrendering deeper. The truth is, anxiety thrives when we believe we're responsible for controlling everything around us. It feeds on our need to predict every outcome, manage every variable, and protect ourselves from every possible threat. But Jesus invites us into something radically different. He invites us to trust Him with the very things that keep us awake at night. Now, I want to address something important right from the start. If you're dealing with anxiety, you're not weak, you're not faithless, you're not broken beyond repair. Anxiety affects millions of people, including many who love Jesus deeply. This isn't about shame or condemnation. This is about discovering the rest that Jesus specifically designed for anxious hearts like yours. Let's start with understanding what anxiety really is. Anxiety is essentially fear projected into the future. It's your mind's attempt to solve problems that haven't happened yet, to control situations that may never occur, to prepare for threats that exist only in your imagination. Your brain, trying to protect you, creates elaborate scenarios of everything that could go wrong and demands that you figure out solutions right now. But here's what happens when you try to solve tomorrow's problems with today's mind. You become exhausted. Your nervous system stays activated, your body remains tense, and your soul never finds rest. You live in a constant state of preparation for battles that may never come, wearing yourself out before the real challenges of life even arrive. This is where Jesus steps in with an invitation that changes everything. When he says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened," he's speaking directly to the anxious heart. The word weary in the original language doesn't just mean tired. It means utterly exhausted from labor, worn down from carrying heavy loads. Sound like your relationship with anxiety? The burden he's talking about isn't just any burden. It's the crushing weight of trying to control your life, manage your future, and guarantee your security through your own strength. It's the exhausting effort of carrying worries that were never meant for your shoulders. But notice what Jesus doesn't say. He doesn't say, "Figure out your anxiety and then come to me." He doesn't say, "Get your life together first." He doesn't say, "Stop worrying and then we'll talk." He says, "Come to me as you are, with all your fears, with all your racing thoughts, with all your sleepless nights." The invitation is immediate, right now. In the middle of your anxiety attack, in the midst of your worry spiral, while your heart is pounding and your mind is racing. Come as you are, not as you think you should be. This is fundamentally different from how the world approaches anxiety. The world says you need to fix yourself, manage your symptoms, develop better coping strategies. And while those things might help, Jesus offers something deeper. He offers to carry what you cannot carry. He offers to be responsible for what you cannot control. He offers to give you rest for your soul. But what does this rest actually look like? It's not the absence of challenges or the elimination of all stress from your life. It's not a promise that nothing difficult will ever happen. The rest Jesus offers is something far more profound. It's the rest of knowing you're held by someone stronger than your circumstances, loved by someone who knows your future, and protected by someone who has already overcome the world. This rest begins with understanding who Jesus is. He's not just a good teacher or a helpful friend. He's the Son of God who spoke the universe into existence. He's the one who holds all things together by the word of his power. He's the one who knows the end from the beginning, who sees every detail of your life, and who works all things together for your good. When you really grasp who Jesus is, anxiety begins to lose its grip. Because if the creator of the universe is for you, what can stand against you? If the one who controls the wind and waves cares about your needs, why would you worry about tomorrow? If the one who conquered death itself is walking with you, what threat could possibly overwhelm you? But knowing who Jesus is intellectually and resting in him practically are two different things. The gap between head knowledge and heart rest is where many people get stuck. They believe Jesus is powerful, but they still carry their burdens. They know he loves them, but they still lose sleep over their problems. They trust him for eternity, but they worry about next week. This is where we need to understand what Jesus means when he says his yoke is easy and his burden is light. A yoke was a wooden frame placed on oxen to help them pull heavy loads. When Jesus talks about his yoke, he's using the imagery of two animals working together, sharing the load. The beautiful picture here is that Jesus doesn't remove all the challenges from your life, but he joins you in carrying them. The anxiety-producing situations don't magically disappear, but you're no longer facing them alone. The weight that once crushed you is now shared with someone infinitely stronger than you. His yoke is easy not because the path is always smooth, but because he's the one setting the pace. His burden is light not because there's no weight to carry, but because he's carrying the heaviest part. When you're yoked with Jesus, you move at his rhythm, follow his direction, and trust his strength. This changes everything about how you approach approach anxiety. Instead of trying to figure out every possible solution, you can rest in His wisdom. Instead of attempting to control every outcome, you can trust His sovereignty. Instead of carrying the weight of an uncertain future, you can place it in His capable hands. But let's get practical about what this looks like in real life. When that familiar wave of anxiety hits, when your mind starts spiraling through worst-case scenarios, when your chest tightens and your breathing becomes shallow, how do you actually rest in Jesus? The first step is recognition. Anxiety often feels so overwhelming that we forget we have options. We feel trapped by our thoughts, imprisoned by our fears, helpless against the storm in our minds. But recognizing that anxiety is happening creates space between you and the feeling. You are not your anxiety. You are a person experiencing anxiety, and there's a significant difference. In that moment of recognition, you can make a choice. You can continue trying to solve everything in your own strength, or you can turn to Jesus with your burden. This isn't about positive thinking or willing yourself to feel better. It's about actively choosing to trust someone greater than yourself with the weight you're carrying. The second step is surrender. This is where many people stumble because surrender feels like giving up, like admitting defeat. But biblical surrender is actually the opposite. It's recognizing that you were never meant to carry these burdens alone, that your Creator designed you to depend on Him, that true strength is found in acknowledging your need for help. Surrender doesn't mean becoming passive or irresponsible. It means releasing your death grip on outcomes you cannot control, while remaining faithful in the areas where you do have influence. You can prepare for tomorrow without being consumed by it. You can plan responsibly without being driven by fear. You can take action without being motivated by anxiety. When you surrender your worries to Jesus, something supernatural happens. The weight begins to lift, not because the circumstances change, but because you're no longer carrying them in your own strength. Your nervous system starts to calm, not because the threats disappear, but because you're trusting someone who is greater than any threat. The third step is replacement. When you remove anxiety from your mind, you need to fill that space with something else, or the worries will simply return with greater intensity. Jesus doesn't just take away your fears, He replaces them with His peace. He doesn't just remove your worries, He fills your mind with His truth. This is where Scripture becomes absolutely vital. The Word of God isn't just information, it's transformation. When you fill your mind with truth about who God is, who you are in Him, and how He works in the world, anxiety loses its power to deceive you. Truth displaces lies. Light overcomes darkness, and peace pushes out fear. But this replacement isn't a one-time event. It's a daily practice, a continual choosing to align your thoughts with God's thoughts, your perspective with His perspective, your concerns with His priorities. Every time anxiety tries to regain its foothold, you have the opportunity to choose truth over fear, faith over worry, rest over striving. The fourth step is communion. Anxiety thrives in isolation, growing stronger when you're alone with your thoughts, feeding on the echo chamber of your fears. But Jesus invites you into relationship, into ongoing conversation, into constant connection with Him. This isn't just about prayer during crisis moments. It's about living in awareness of His presence throughout your day. When you develop the habit of talking to Jesus throughout your normal routine, anxiety has less opportunity to build momentum. You're not waiting until you're overwhelmed to seek His help. you're already connected to the source of peace. You're not trying to remember His promises in the middle of a panic attack. His voice is already familiar to you. This communion transforms how you interpret the events of your life. Instead of seeing every challenge as a threat to overcome, you begin to see opportunities to experience God's faithfulness. Instead of viewing uncertainty as something to fear, you start to see it as space for trust to grow. Instead of experiencing problems as evidence that you're not safe, you recognize them as invitations to depend more fully on Jesus. The beautiful truth is that Jesus doesn't just offer you rest from anxiety. He offers you rest in anxiety. Even when anxious feelings arise, even when circumstances seem overwhelming, even when your mind wants to spiral into worry, you can find a deep, unshakable peace in the midst of it all. This peace isn't based on your circumstances being perfect or your problems being solved. It's based on your identity as God's beloved child, your security in His unchanging love, your confidence in His sovereign control over every detail of your life. This peace can coexist with challenging situations because it flows from a source that transcends your circumstances. Many people misunderstand what it means to rest in Jesus. They think it requires them to feel peaceful all the time, to never experience worry or concern, to maintain perfect faith in every situation. But that's not what Jesus promises. He promises to be with you in the storm, not necessarily to remove every storm from your path. Sometimes resting in Jesus looks like crying out to Him in the middle of the night when anxiety wakes you up. Sometimes it looks like admitting you're scared while simultaneously trusting that He's in control. Sometimes it looks like taking medication for anxiety while also believing in God's healing power. Sometimes it looks like seeking professional help while maintaining faith in God's care. Rest in Jesus isn't about perfection. It's about relationship. It's not about having all the answers. It's about trusting the one who does. It's not about feeling strong enough to handle everything. It's about being weak enough to let Him handle what you cannot. This kind of rest requires practice. Your mind has been trained to worry, conditioned to expect the worst, programmed to prepare for danger. Rewiring these thought patterns takes time, patience, and consistent choice to trust God's truth over your fears. But every time you choose rest over anxiety, every time you surrender rather than strive, every time you trust rather than worry, you're building new neural pathways that make peace more accessible. The process isn't always linear. You might have a breakthrough one day and struggle the next. You might experience profound peace in one situation and overwhelming anxiety in another. This doesn't mean you're failing or that God's promises aren't true. It means you're human, and learning to rest in Jesus is a journey, not a destination. What makes this journey possible is understanding that your rest isn't based on your performance. Jesus doesn't love you more when you're peaceful and less when you're anxious. His commitment to you doesn't fluctuate based on your emotional state. His promises don't become less true when you struggle to believe them. Your worth isn't determined by how well you manage your anxiety. This understanding removes the pressure to get it right, to overcome anxiety quickly, to prove your faith through perfect peace. Instead, it invites you into a safe relationship where you can be honest about your struggles while receiving unconditional love and support. The enemy of your soul wants you to believe that anxiety is evidence of spiritual failure, that worry proves you don't trust God enough, that fear disqualifies you from God's love and help. But Jesus welcomes anxious hearts with open arms. He understands your weaknesses. He's compassionate toward your fears, and He's patient with your process of learning to trust Him. In fact, your anxiety might actually be a gift pointing you toward deeper dependence on Jesus. When everything feels uncertain, when your own strength isn't enough, when your mind can't solve what tomorrow might bring, you discover how desperately you need Him. The very weakness that anxiety exposes becomes the doorway to experiencing God's strength in ways you never knew possible. Think about it this way. When you're physically exhausted, you don't feel guilty about needing sleep. When you're hungry, you don't apologize for needing food. When you're thirsty, you don't feel ashamed about needing water. These are natural responses to natural needs. Your soul's need for rest, for peace, for security beyond what this world can offer is just as natural and just as legitimate. Jesus designed you with this need. He created you to depend on Him, to find your rest in His presence, to discover your peace in His love. Anxiety often arises when you try to meet these soul-level needs through earthly means, when you attempt to find ultimate security in temporary things, when you look for perfect peace in an imperfect world. But here's what happens when you stop fighting your need for Jesus and start embracing it. When you stop seeing dependence on Him as weakness and start recognizing it as wisdom. When you stop trying to be your own savior and start letting Him be yours. Everything changes. The circumstances that once triggered overwhelming anxiety begin to look different when viewed through the lens of God's sovereignty. The problems that kept you awake at night become opportunities to witness His faithfulness. The uncertainties that paralyzed you with fear become invitations to experience His perfect timing and provision. This doesn't mean you become careless or irresponsible. Resting in Jesus actually enables you to think more clearly, plan more wisely, and act more effectively because you're no longer operating from a place of panic. When your foundation is secure in Him, you can navigate life's storms with greater stability and wisdom. Consider how differently you approach challenges when you're well rested versus when you're exhausted. When you've had adequate sleep, problems seem more manageable, solutions come more easily, and your perspective remains clearer. The same principle applies spiritually. When your soul is rested in Jesus, when you're drawing from His strength rather than depleting your own, you have resources available that anxiety cannot access. But let's address something crucial here. Resting in Jesus doesn't mean you'll never feel anxious again. It means anxiety no longer has to control you. You might still experience the physical sensations, the racing thoughts, the what-if scenarios, but they don't have to dictate your choices or determine your peace. When anxious feelings arise, instead of fighting them or feeling guilty about them, you can acknowledge them and then redirect your focus. You can say, I notice I'm feeling anxious right now, and that's okay. Jesus, I bring these feelings to you. Help me rest in your truth rather than being consumed by my fears. This approach removes the additional layer of anxiety that comes from being anxious about being anxious. You're not trying to achieve some impossible standard of never feeling worried. You're simply choosing to process those feelings in relationship with Jesus rather than in isolation. The beautiful thing about bringing your anxiety to Jesus is that He already knows about it anyway. He sees every racing thought before you think it. He feels every pounding heartbeat before you feel it. He understands every fear before you can articulate it. There's nothing about your anxiety that surprises Him or overwhelms Him or causes Him to love you less. This means you can be completely honest with Him about your struggles. You don't have to clean up your thoughts before bringing them to Jesus. You don't have to wait until you're feeling more spiritual or more put together. You can come to Him in the mess, in the middle of the panic, in the depths of your worry, and find Him already there waiting for you. Prayer becomes different when you understand this. Instead of trying to sound impressive or put together, you can simply pour out your heart. Instead of asking Him to remove all your problems, you can ask Him to help you trust Him in the middle of them. Instead of demanding immediate solutions, you can request the grace to walk through uncertainty with peace. Sometimes the most powerful prayer for anxiety is simply, "Jesus, I can't handle this, but I know you can. I'm choosing to trust you even though I don't understand. Help me rest in you right now." No elaborate words, no perfect theology, just honest dependence on His strength and love. The Psalms are filled with examples of this kind of raw, honest prayer. David frequently brought his fears, his worries, his overwhelming circumstances directly to God without pretense or apology. He cried out about enemies pursuing him, about feeling abandoned, about uncertainty and danger. Yet in the same prayers, he declared his trust in God's faithfulness and found his way back to rest and peace. This pattern teaches us that faith and fear can coexist temporarily. You can feel afraid and still choose to trust. You can experience anxiety and still rest in God's love. You can acknowledge your weakness and still rely on His strength. The goal isn't to eliminate all difficult emotions, but to process them in relationship with Jesus. As you practice this kind of honest, dependent prayer, something remarkable happens. Your relationship with Jesus deepens. He stops being just a theological concept and becomes your daily companion, your constant source of strength, your ever-present help in times of trouble. Anxiety, instead of driving you away from God, actually drives you toward Him. This is one of the ways God can use even difficult things for your good. The very anxiety that feels like it's destroying your peace can become the catalyst for discovering a deeper level of rest in Jesus than you ever knew was possible. The weakness that feels like a liability can become the doorway to experiencing His strength in unprecedented ways. But this transformation requires a fundamental shift in how you view your anxiety. Instead of seeing it as evidence that something is wrong with you, you can begin to see it as evidence that you need something more than this world can provide. Instead of viewing it as a problem to be solved, you can recognize it as a need to be met by Jesus. This doesn't minimize the real impact anxiety has on your life. It doesn't dismiss the physical symptoms or the emotional toll or the way it can interfere with your daily functioning. What it does is reframe your anxiety within the larger context of God's love and care for you. When you understand that Jesus wants to meet you in your anxiety, not after you've overcome it, everything changes. You stop waiting to feel better before you seek His help. You stop trying to earn His love through emotional stability. You stop believing that your worth is tied to your ability to manage your feelings perfectly. Instead, you discover that His love for you is constant, regardless of your emotional state. His commitment to you doesn't waver when you're struggling. His promises remain true, even when your feelings tell you otherwise. His peace is available, even in the middle of your storm. This is the radical nature of God's grace. It meets you exactly where you are, not where you think you should be. It embraces you in your weakness, not just in your strength. It offers rest to the weary, comfort to the anxious, and peace to the troubled heart. Living from this understanding changes how you approach each day. You wake up knowing that whatever challenges arise, you don't have to face them in your own strength. Whatever uncertainties emerge, you don't have to solve them in your own wisdom. Whatever fears surface, you don't have to overcome them in your own power. You have access to resources beyond your own capabilities. You have strength beyond your own limitations. You have peace beyond your own understanding, not because you've earned it or achieved it, but because Jesus freely offers it to all who come to him with their burdens. This is the invitation that remains open to you every single day, every single moment. Come to him. Bring your racing thoughts, your pounding heart, your sleepless nights, your overwhelming concerns. Bring them not as evidence of your failure, but as opportunities to experience his faithfulness. Bring them not as problems you've failed to solve, but as burdens he's designed to carry. The rest he offers isn't just temporary relief from your symptoms. It's the deep, soul-level peace that comes from knowing you're loved unconditionally, held securely, and cared for completely by the Creator of the universe. It's the rest of knowing that your life has meaning and purpose beyond your ability to control every outcome. It's the peace of understanding that your future is secure in his hands. This rest transforms your relationship with time itself. When anxiety grips you, it collapses your entire existence into this one moment of fear, making everything feel urgent and desperate. Your mind races between regrets from yesterday and terrors about tomorrow, never finding peace in the present. But when you rest in Jesus, time expands. You discover that this moment, right here and now, is where his presence meets you. You don't have to solve next month's problems today. You don't have to carry next year's burdens in this hour. Jesus invites you to live in the rhythm of grace rather than the frenzy of anxiety. His timeline isn't driven by your panic or your need to have everything figured out immediately. He works in seasons, in his perfect timing, with a perspective that spans eternity. When you align yourself with his pace, you find breathing room. You discover that most of the urgency you feel is manufactured by fear, not reality. Think about how anxiety distorts your perception of time. 5 minutes of worry feels like 5 hours. One sleepless night stretches into eternity. A week of uncertainty seems like a lifetime of suffering. But when you're resting in Jesus, time resumes its proper proportion. You can be present to today's joys without being consumed by tomorrow's possibilities. You can engage fully with what's in front of you without being paralyzed by what might be coming. This presence is itself a form of worship. When you choose to be here now, trusting Jesus with everything else, you're declaring that he is sufficient for this moment. You're acknowledging that his grace is enough for today's challenges without needing to stockpile worry for future ones. You're living as if his promises are true, as if his love is reliable, as if his power is adequate for whatever lies ahead. But let's talk about what happens when your mind argues with this truth, because it will. Anxiety is persistent, and it has convinced you that constant vigilance is necessary for survival. It whispers that letting your guard down is dangerous, that trusting God completely is naive, that you need to maintain control or everything will fall apart. These thoughts feel so real, so urgent, so necessary. This is where you need to understand the difference between facts and feelings. Your feelings are real, but they're not always reliable indicators of truth. You can feel like God has abandoned you while he's actually holding you closer than ever. You can feel like your future is hopeless while he's already preparing good things you cannot see. You can feel overwhelmed by problems while He's working solutions you cannot imagine. The truth about your situation isn't determined by how you feel about it. The truth is found in who God says He is and what He promises to do. When your emotions contradict His word, you have a choice. You can believe what you feel, or you can believe what He says. This choice, made repeatedly over time, gradually rewires your default response to anxiety. Scripture becomes your anchor in these moments, not as magic words that instantly eliminate all distress, but as solid ground beneath your feet when everything else feels unstable. When anxiety tells you that you're alone, you remember that He promised never to leave you or forsake you. When worry insists that your future is uncertain, you recall that He knows the plans He has for you, plans for good and not for evil. When fear declares that you're not strong enough, you rest in the truth that His strength is made perfect in your weakness. These aren't just nice sentiments or positive affirmations. They're declarations of reality from the One who created and sustains all things. When you speak truth over your anxiety, you're not denying your feelings or pretending everything is fine. You're asserting what is more true than what you feel, what is more permanent than what you're experiencing, what is more reliable than what you're perceiving. This practice of speaking truth takes courage because anxiety is loud and persistent. It demands immediate attention, insists on being heard, throws tantrums when ignored. But truth spoken consistently, gently, repeatedly, begins to quiet the noise. Not through force or aggression, but through the simple power of light dispelling darkness. Consider how a small candle changes an entire room. It doesn't fight the darkness or argue with it or try to push it away. It simply shines, and the darkness naturally retreats. This is what happens when you speak God's truth into your anxious thoughts. The light of His word naturally displaces the darkness of fear. But this isn't a formula that works automatically without relationship. The power isn't in the words themselves, but in the One who spoke them. When you know Jesus personally, when you've experienced His faithfulness in your own life, when you've tasted His goodness and seen His love, His promises carry weight. They're not empty platitudes, but personal commitments from someone you trust. Building this trust happens through relationship, and relationship happens through communication. Prayer becomes less about presenting your requests and more about sharing your heart. You learn to talk to Jesus like the friend He is, bringing Him into your daily experiences, your random thoughts, your mundane moments. Anxiety thrives in isolation, but it withers in the light of ongoing conversation with the One who loves you most. This conversation doesn't have to be formal or eloquent. Some of my most meaningful prayers have been desperate whispers in the middle of the night, honest confessions of fear and doubt, raw admissions that I don't know how to handle what I'm facing. Jesus receives these prayers not with judgment, but with compassion. He sees your heart, He understands your struggle, and He responds with the tenderness of a loving father, comforting a frightened child. The beautiful mystery is that as you learn to rest in Jesus, you begin to see how He's been caring for you all along. You start noticing His provision in ways you missed before. You recognize His protection in situations where you thought you were on your own. You discover His guidance in decisions you thought you made independently. Anxiety had blinded you to His constant presence and care, but rest opens your eyes to see His faithfulness everywhere. This awareness creates a feedback loop of trust. As you see evidence of His care, it becomes easier to rest in His love. As you experience His faithfulness in small things, you develop confidence to trust Him with bigger things. As you witness His perfect timing repeatedly, You learn to wait peacefully for his solutions to unfold. The transformation isn't just internal. As anxiety loses its grip on your heart, it also loses its control over your choices. You make decisions from a place of peace rather than panic. You respond to challenges with wisdom rather than reactivity. You engage with others from security rather than defensiveness. Your relationships improve because you're not constantly seeking reassurance or projecting your fears onto situations. People around you begin to notice the change. There's a calmness about you that wasn't there before, a stability that remains even when circumstances are difficult. This isn't because your problems have disappeared, but because your foundation has shifted. You're building your life on the rock of Christ rather than the shifting sand of circumstances. This foundation makes all the difference when storms come, and they will come. Jesus never promised a life free from difficulty, but he promised to be with you in every difficulty. The peace he offers isn't the absence of trouble, but his presence in the middle of trouble. When you know he's with you, when you're certain of his love, when you're confident in his power. External storms lose their ability to create internal chaos. You learn to distinguish between legitimate concerns that require action and anxious thoughts that require surrender. Wisdom emerges as you discern what's yours to do and what's God's to handle. You become more effective, not less, because your energy isn't depleted by worry. You can focus on what truly matters because you're not distracted by fears about things beyond your control. This doesn't mean you become passive or irresponsible. Resting in Jesus actually frees you to be more engaged with life, not less. When you're not consumed by anxiety about outcomes, you can pour yourself fully into the process. When you're not paralyzed by fear of failure, you can take appropriate risks. When you're not exhausted by worry, you have energy available for creativity, service, and relationship. Tonight, when you lay your head on your pillow, remember this: the invitation remains open. Come to him with your racing heart, your spinning mind, your overwhelming fears. Come not when you've conquered anxiety, but while you're still in its grip. Come not when you feel strong enough, but especially when you feel too weak to take another step. Jesus is waiting for you right there in the darkness, ready to exchange your anxiety for his peace, your burden for his rest, your fear for his love. The choice is yours, and it's available right now.